Alright, another response video to the holiday. Mostly on the subject, very good. So yeah, nothing to fight about except the observations regarding how the physical universe works and such. So you titled the video "Orthodox Physics Isn't My Physics," and he's essentially arguing that he's just playing a kind of devil's advocate in the sense of showing me the monster that I already know I'm fighting, and saying that he's just fighting for the monster, essentially, standing in for him, being a second, something like that. And as I've already pointed out over and over and over again, the monster has no evidence. The monster is not a monster. The monster is made out of dirty toilet paper. You can just go through all these idiotic things, the whole bent space, time dimensions, no evidence for these things. The Eddington experiment I keep bringing up because it's just so egregiously obvious that when we had the most perfect eclipse in North American history, nobody tries to repeat the experiment. Why? What is that? I mean, a completely flawed, historically important experiment, and no one tries to repeat it? I mean, as, in any kind of sense and with any kind of integrity, except doing it, the nickel and dime way. That isn't glaring. And so he just keeps making excuses. Then he also uses this word that their math is useful because it's so predictive. And, and my argument is that's just another preposterous lie. They don't predict anything but fake things. Right? I mean, their math predicted dark matter because their math didn't work. And they fixed it by making an invisible fake thing to fix their math that didn't work. And then everything else they invented were all things that we don't have any evidence that exist. Neutrinos, popinos, dozinos, gazinos. They haven't predicted anything real. Unless you want to say they predicted that dogs poo. Something we can all observe. Their formulas are just formalizations of things we observe. Okay, they're not predicting anything that we can't already predict just by I mean, I can predict the roulette wheel. The ball's going to fall in one of the slots. I mean, it's really not hard for me to do that. And yes, they can write a formula that'll tell me the exact probability, okay, for for each slot, what the probability is that the ball will fall in that little hole. And they can write me a little formula for that. That's not predicting anything useful. It's predicting something we already know is going to happen. And I'm not saying that the math isn't useful. I'm just saying let's not play with this word prediction. They are not prognosticating about anything real. They've never made a real prediction in their life. They're only formalizing things we can all observe. How many trees fell down today? Yes, there's a statistic. You can put it on a chart. You can draw charts of it and everything. They're not predicting why trees fall. They're not explaining why dogs poo. They're just telling us, look, it happens in a regular interval for some mysterious reason. So I'm just so sick of them being able to use this word prediction like they've done some, whatever that classic pseudoscience, whatever the name of that woman was who was always guessing everything. She makes 10 zillion guesses, and every now and then she's right, and everybody goes, oh, look how she's brilliant, she predicted it. Yeah, she predicted 10,000 other things that you're not paying any attention to that never happened. I mean, it's just so fake. So it's fine. You want to be devil advocate for, I think, what a physics I've explained is weakly evidenced. Now, if you want to claim they have a lot of good evidence, then go ahead and make that claim and let's have that conversation about their good evidence and their good experiments. I might have even pointed out on my own porch how the Michelson-Morley experiment was theoretically wrong. It couldn't have worked because they're using a half-silvered mirror, and nobody wants to take account for what a half-silvered mirror means by their own other prediction. So one of their predictions says if you make little tiny holes, light will diffract. And then they have another prediction is, if you have little tiny holes, you'll create perfectly equal beams. And you say that's rational physics? That I have somehow, you have to draw this monster for me because this monster is so monstrous and I need to defeat this horrible monster? No, we know the monster only exists because the physicists are cowards. They don't allow themselves to be scrutinized. Unlike their attacks on the religious kooks and the nutters and the tinfoil hatters, you know, unlike them picking all the ripe and rotten fruit off the tree and saying, look how strong I am, I squished, you know, rotten fruit. You know, they don't have the guts to go anywhere near a healthy apple. You know, crush it in their hands. All right, they're cowards. They have run from the argument, run from scrutiny. And they've done it just because most of these experiments do require an investment of cash, okay, and nobody's financing it, and you know, facilities, universities and things. And all of them are being run by this cabal of perpetual and preposterous phantasmagorical liars who are just in the business of selling woo. It's a frickin' religion. It's founded on just wooey space. There's wooey space everywhere. Wooey-tons and wooey space. Right? I mean, that's all there is, right? They explain the most fundamental elements of physics, gravity and magnetism, with wooey space and wooey-tons. And you say, I have to pay attention to this monster. When I know the monster has nothing to do with facts. I can defeat the monster if I'm allowed to argue with the monster on the facts, on the evidence. Because their evidence, as I keep pointing out, sucks. The Eddington experiment sucks. Okay, all of their light scatter experiments proving photons are moved by gravity, they suck. It's shitty evidence. And of course, they're two-slit experiments. They can't even describe the simplest experiment in physics, just about. You can't get much simpler. Two fucking little holes. And can any of them describe the pattern accurately? No, not to save their life. Can they, you know, they don't even pay any attention to the only feature that makes the two-slit experiment interesting, which is the envelope idea. They don't pay any attention to that. There's no math for it. There's no nothing. They just pretend it doesn't exist. I mean, you know, so for you to argue that you're just doing me a favor, okay, by showing me how much integrity the monster has. No, the monster has no integrity. It's a naked emperor, and the only, and again, it's not because I have an absence of facts on my side that I can't defeat it. We know the only reason why I can't defeat it is because it's a fucking coward. And that's it. That's the only reason. Okay. Just make that clear. So what else did he say? It needs responding to. It's a couple of trivialisms. It's gotten me thinking all kinds of stuff. So that's the good thing about interaction. Even the mindless marbles thing said something, and it's sort of related to what Steve Bro said, and you know, about defending Lenz's law, and then that takes you to the right hand rule, and then that gets back to my little, you know, how attraction and repulsion work and the ping pong paddle argument, which is really obvious one. You know, when repulsion is really easy to explain, attraction is complicated, and so I got a new model in my head of how to illustrate. You know, instead of using the arrow thing, it's still going to have arrows, but a way of understanding how electrons collect momentum. And so I think I have a new model that might make it, that might illustrate it better, but it also complicates it because now it's still missing something. But I want to, you know, it just makes it so mechanical. I'm just saying I want to get the mechanics down really solid and then pay somebody to make a simulation. But anyway, that's all side subject. So what else did I want to bring up? Okay, so he talked about, you know, so this came up in the stupid message board discussion where they kept using this stupid power formula. Power equals I squared V or whatever. You know, it's like, what are you talking about? It's the whole process of radio transmission. It's never anything other than power. It's never in any other form than power. Okay, it's always in the form of watts. And so Halliday was sort of saying that somehow I wasn't aware of the fact that, yes, radio towers have to produce megawatts. Okay, like a lighthouse, they have to produce megawatts. And then 5 or 10 miles away, I can see the light, so to speak, because this was creating so much of it there. But what I'm going to receive isn't going to be 100 watts or 50 watts. It's going to be like a tiny, tiny amount of light that I'm going to get from that lighthouse when I'm miles and miles away. And the same is true for a radio transmitter. And I didn't say anything to deny that at all. I'm just saying that it's going to be in the form of watts. What's flying through the atmosphere is wattage, power, okay? Not voltage. Voltage is something that happens inside of atoms, all right? Voltage isn't flying through the atmosphere, you know, from a radio antenna. It's not 1 million volts flying through the atmosphere. It's not like a piece of electricity or something. It's not voltage going through the atmosphere. It's power, okay, in the form of force. And so you can do a reductionist argument here, and then we know that photons irritate electrons, so I would argue that it's got to be the electron force. So it's half of magnetism. It's a charge force, you might argue, but realistically it's magnetism, and it's the monopole of magnetism, the force, and that's what a photon is. And it stimulates the electrons, and when you stimulate the electrons, you create voltage between the atoms. That pressure is conveyed through the atoms. That's the electricity part. But it's always in the form of power. When there's a voltage and a current, you need the current to move the voltage, that's power. So it's always in the form of power. It never is in any other form. But anyway. So I mean, it's just stupid to throw this power equals blah blah blah. No, it doesn't. It has nothing to do with it. It was power when it was left. It was power when it was received by the antenna, and it's power when it moves through the antenna, and it's power when it goes into the amplifier. It's always in the form of power. It's never in any other form. I can say that third time. Yeah, that's what it takes, though. You got to say things like 6 times. Or no, you have to say them more than that, because when I say them 6 times, people still. But what about P equals I squared V? Or V squared I? Anyway. So the first half we can sort of negate, because I don't think there was anything else in there that was important. And it does get a little bit interesting in this piece, I think.
Mathematical vector space model and a reality model.
All right, so look, the vector space model doesn't have anything wrong with it in a sense, because that's exactly what I'm saying. There's quanta at locations. There's stuff with a momentum. Stuff at a momentum. At locations. That's what photons are. They're stuff with a momentum in locations. And the matter has sort of got a whole bunch of that stuff in it. So the matter is essentially made of the same thing, which is a bunch of stuff with a momentum. Except the momentums are in cul-de-sacs and dead ends and circles and back and forth. They're in traps. They're caught between ping pong paddles, and they're caught in perpetual traps. And that's what makes matter matter, is that all the energy's trapped in I'm not going anywhere. Okay, all the momentum's doing this kind of crap. It's not going any, or it's doing this kind of crap. It's not getting anywhere. So the matter is force, not going anywhere. Okay, moving but not going anywhere. And the force, when free, it has a vector and it's going somewhere. So the matter still has vector space. It's just that it's a more condensed vector space. There's more little bits with a vector, and there's less little bits in empty space with a vector. There's more pieces of empty space in empty space. Empty space is less dense. Get it? It's like a vacuum. Has less stuff in it. See if the keyboard will work. Yeah, good.
So, why I think it's too strong to say there's no evidence
All right.
No conclusive. When they talk about these physical interpretations, it's true.
All right. So the evidence is weak. That's the first fundamental argument. Is they're basing their whole this whole UFO theory, this whole Sasquatch theory on these crappy pictures, right? On a couple of pieces of fur that don't have any DNA on them. I mean, it is insanely bad evidence for the nature of their confidence. They spew this confidence, which is the most proven formulas in the universe ever. We have it nailed. You can't possibly be. There's no particle theory possible. I mean, they're like LIGO. It's not possible that it could have been some other noise than those two black holes colliding. It's not possible that something else made a noise. I mean, it's just a preposterous overstatement. Their confidence is completely out of any rational boundary.
That the truth is they can't stand on those physical interpretations too weightily, though they do. There's no evidence.
Yes, they have metaphors that are nonsensical, okay, virtual things and dimensions that don't really exist, and then they do this two-slit thing where it splits in half and has something called the magical wave function thingy takes over. So they make up all these weird players, these things that don't exist, to make their model, and then they pretend 1 minute they'll say, well, we're just doing that metaphorically, but when it's to their convenience, they'll say that's evidence of the fact that we're right. So, I mean, you can't have it both ways. And I think the minimum statement you have to say is that this is very low integrity science. Physics over the last 100 years has been very low integrity science.
That carries all the way to the bottom of their arguments, wherein you find that they've proven it. And I think it's quite fabulous to understand DraftScience prediction in balking against the system and authority, in saying, no, what you're going to do is you're not.
Yes, we're just going to find some experiments that unravel this canard. So again, you know, the whole relativity canard is based on some notion that photons have two momentums. Now there's got to be a way to engineer an experiment, a light clock, so to speak, and demonstrate that no, the photons do go. Once you release one, it goes. It doesn't care how fast you were going one way or how fast you were going this way or how fast you were going that way. It does one thing. It has its own little legs. So it's like you're dropping a duck that has little walking legs. And it just doesn't matter what movement you were doing. When it hits the road, all it's gonna hit is its little feet. It's not gonna have zero momentum until it starts walking. So I mean, I'm just saying, their science, their physics is corrupt. Every piece of it is corrupt. Every single piece. All of relativity is garbage, and all of quantum mechanics is garbage. They haven't gotten anything right.
You're going to see cancellation. You're going to see double frequency. It's a remarkable idea. I will eat my fucking hat if he's right, that science has been so dumb and stupid for so long that that experiment too does not perplex us. It doesn't mean I think. I just think we haven't got a good handle yet on what reality is.
Right, and I'm thinking, so he's basically going to make rationalizations, say they just made a mistake or something, or they just didn't know, or blah, 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 they overlooked something. No, it has to go deeper than that. Because it's just, it bends all credulity to think that it never, you know, none of them in playing with all this stuff ever thought to say, well, wouldn't it be better if we just actually received the energy without this audio crap to fuck with it? Let's try just doing the energy experiment. So, you know, I'm supposed to believe that none of these physicists ever said, well, can't we just detect the energy? I mean, you know, especially when Lewin's sitting there with a light bulb on an antenna, you know, collecting energy. It doesn't occur to any of them that, well, why are we putting audio signals on this radar experiment then, if I can collect energy?
And how to make different mathematical models that aren't vector spaces. Now, the utility...
So again, I don't know why you're thinking that vector spaces are necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's Maxwell's equations, in my opinion. That's all his equations are, is rays of force at a momentum and direction. Makes perfectly good sense to me that's exactly what's happening. There's rays of force moving a direction with an intensity.
That they burr out true, that's something else. I think that I don't think they intentionally lie in the egregious, pernicious manner in which might be suggested by DraftScience.
Okay, so you're not saying it's egregious and pernicious when they say that they've proven that light is bent by gravity. And they just say we don't need to do any more experiments. We've proven it. When we know the Eddington experiment was absolute garbage. In Eddington's own words, I wouldn't stake my life on the results. I mean, and it's never been successfully repeated, ever. And you're saying this isn't pernicious in some sort of really aggressive way? I mean, this is the experiment that proved Einstein's relativity. His whole relativity theory was said it's correct because of this stupid experiment. And then all of quantum mechanics is based on this stupid two-slit thing, which is completely, and the Young two-slit thing, which is completely unremarkable, as Newton was already putting hairs in front of fucking photons. You know, so you can't see that this isn't pernicious in the sense they can't tell the truth about the historical record. Okay, I mean, Young was completely unremarkable. You know, all stuff Newton had already done. They had 300 years to come up with an answer for why it happens. And then one day in 1932 or whatever, they decided, well, let's just make photons into a wave and fuck it all. And you don't think that's pernicious?
Well, I do find it very pernicious and very egregious, but not in my vocabulary.
Yeah, in your vocabulary, that means give them a Nobel Prize. You know, so in your opinion, that doesn't mean anything. The word pernicious, shenanigans, really, really, really bad science. That doesn't mean it's really, really bad science. That's pretty average good science. Really, really bad means really, really okay.
Contrasting to DraftScience, he would speak tenfold magnitude, 100-fold more.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. Like 7 years ago, I didn't have this much animosity because I didn't realize just how big a liars they are about everything. I didn't realize that this prediction, that they used the word prediction when they saw a dog pooing every single day. And then they said, I'm going to predict the dog will poo tomorrow. I didn't realize their predictions were so empty and meaningless that they never predicted anything that isn't fake. The only thing they've predicted is the existence of fake things, things for which there's no evidence that they really exist. They've never predicted something that actually does exist.
Magnitude in that.
I mean, beyond obvious predictions, again, like, okay, we find out that light has frequencies. And then we find out that there's invisible light that has a lower frequency and invisible light that has a higher frequency. And then some miraculous person guesses, well, maybe there's something higher frequency than ultraviolet light. Maybe there's something lower frequency than infrared. And that's a remarkable prediction? I mean, it's, you know, it's like looking at an empty garbage bag and predicting you can probably put garbage in there.
Of that egregious transgression of intellectual dignity, or whatever the word is.
Yeah, standards, rational standards for what the evidence should be. Like we're at trial and we're going to put something in the Hooskow. And you can obviously see that this evidence sucks. Okay? You can't acquit or convict on this garbage evidence. It's just plain garbage. Wham! Mistrial.
It's honesty. So there's that. Oh, the interesting thing is I'm not sure whether there's a misunderstanding here. When DraftScience talks about the pure wattage output of a transmitter, after a mile or so, we're done.
I thought this was earlier in the conversation. But yeah, obviously I know the inverse square law. I'm always talking about it with light bulbs and all kinds of things. So yes, I'm aware.
It's a milliwatts, because of the inverse square law. Well,
the point is they keep using an equation where they think the energy going in the radar experiment, the energy going to the locations, they think it's in voltage. So they're saying voltage squared times current equals power. So they're saying that no, you have to square the voltage. Well, there's no voltage traveling from the antenna to the antenna. There is no voltage doing that.
What the TV transmit, the TV aerial, the radio aerial signals, the frequencies, FM, AM frequencies. We're miles away from the transmitter. It's a matter of milliwatts and maybe even microwatts. I don't know.
Yes, that's exactly the point I made. That's what makes it a little bit tricky. Okay, that's why, you sort of need college-style facilities sometimes to do these experiments, because you need pretty good equipment because you're measuring pretty small amounts of change. And, doing it on my porch shouldn't be let's do it that way. I mean, in 100 years, you think the scientists would have done some of these experiments to actually detect this tiny bit of voltage.
That's hitting
voltage when it's in the antenna. Not when it's in the air. Voltage is in conductors. Voltage happens between atoms. Atoms exchange pressure, and that's called voltage. So it's the pressure in the atom. That's voltage.
Antennas. Uh-oh. I don't know whether that impacts DraftScience's reasoning at certain times. I don't know. Get that.
See, I've sort of made the obvious point. Okay, Lewin did the experiment, so we know what happens. The giant radio transmitter getting collected by the high tension wires proves the point that you can collect this voltage as just a raw voltage. So it can be done. And I'm just saying with microwave radiation, I said it pretty clearly. You would think that if you have 100 watts of energy coming out of the microwave, or if you want to go to 500 watts or something, you would think that just 4 feet away you're getting hit by enough wattage, okay, that you're talking about maybe you're going to collect 3 watts, and maybe only 100 milliwatts will be over the noise level. But I'm just saying that clearly it's within the realm of reasonable to say this is a detectable difference in energy. So it seems logical that I can hold a piece of metal near my microwave oven, and I can read it on a voltmeter and says, okay, this is the noise it's picking up. And then I turn my microwave oven on, and I can get a little bit of a signal saying, oh, there's a couple of microwaves leaking out of there. So I'm just saying that's all we need is to detect any change over noise. So once we know we can detect the power, then we're just saying, well, where's there more power? So I'm just saying it's a very doable experiment.
Lied out. I just need to adjust my position. So let's have a look. So I don't believe in anything that uses a mathematical vector space model. I don't.
All right, so that one I just don't understand exactly, because as I understand vector space, that's exactly what really happens in the universe. There either is something in a location or there's nothing in a location. If there is something, it likely has a vector, especially if it's a force. So if there's a force bit, a quanta, in a location, it has a vector. Now, if it's an electron and there's nothing around it for thousands of miles, well, then maybe the electron is just sitting there for hundreds of years or thousands of years, because it doesn't have, there's not a significant enough imbalance in the force to propel it anywhere.
Mendham is right to say, I mean, Nima Arkani Hamed, that's the guy I was trying to remember earlier.
Right, well, you bring up these guys, and what you really should say, you know, just to preface it, just to make it understood who these people are and what they're for, you know, is you got to point out that, oh, he's, you know, force field mush theory 14, or string theory, I think he's a stringer, or some other kind of crap. So you got to kind of point out what their agenda is.
And he has, slouch down again. He has, in one of the messenger lectures as well, I couldn't recall the name of the series, the messenger lectures. In one of the messenger lectures, or maybe it's another lecture of his, but he says, oh yeah, light, we proved it's not traveling through an ether, but kind of is. So it's, so yeah, classical physics, quantum physics, when it speaks of fields, each field is its own kind of ether.
Yeah, I know, but the point is that Feynman kind of pointed out, so I could just keep, you know, it's so ironic. I can use Feynman quotes to undo Feynman, you know, in the sense of undo quantum mechanics, because he clearly says the thing don't work that way. I mean, it's you know, he was convinced by the preponderance of the evidence that photons just can't be described as having negative energy. They just can't be described that way, because they wouldn't work, and they don't spread, and they aren't connected, and you just can't make them into medium particles.
To facilitate this kind of allowing of the negativeness, as you point out, of photons and the cancelling out abilities.
So again, you say there's a canceling out ability, but I'm just saying, so you really do believe that when you do a two-slit experiment, only half the light that goes through the openings actually hits the target. You don't understand that, no, the light gets bent to a new location. And in the radar experiment, again, the math breaks down and falls completely apart. I mean, Lewin's explanation where he covers one of the horns, that explanation completely breaks down unless you're going to concede that, oh yeah, the radar that was going here moved to over here. If you don't do that, you can't get the 4-time increase. But obviously, as I've pointed out, people don't understand that the 4-time increase is a consequence of the fact that you're recreating a sine wave out of an electrical signal. You're turning a monopole electrical signal back into a dipole electrical signal. You're giving it plus and minus qualities when it started off with just positive qualities.
But I don't. It can't be denied. Talking about evidence, what can't be denied is that for the classical models, we have classical mathematical predictions, and
again, so I don't even know what you mean by classical, so that doesn't even make any sense. Again, Newton pointed out very clearly, I don't have my predictions have to do with things that are events. I can't do anything with cause. I have absolutely no clue what causes any of this shit. So again, this idea that a formalization of effects is an explanation of cause. How many times do I have to say that? A formalization of effects, formalizing the probability of dog poo, is not explaining why dogs poo. It says nothing on the subject of why dogs poo. So let's quit pretending, okay, that you can use these words, that these mathematical formulas are predicting something. They're just describing something any idiot could predict. I mean, they're all predicting things that we can observe. We can do it. Newton can put the layers of glass and he can count where the photons go. He doesn't need a formula to predict that, yeah, that's what happens every single frickin' time. I don't need a formula to predict what happens every single time. Okay, it's nice to make a formula. Okay, you're all happy you have a formula now describing what your odds are when the roulette wheel goes around. I mean, I could intuitively figure out that there's the same likelihood that it's going to fall in any one of the little slots. I can figure that out on my own. But okay, it's nice to have a formula that says, yes, there's a 1 in 32 chance, a 1 in 32 chance, a 1 in 32 chance. Okay, thank you very much. But I don't need your formula. I can see the probability.
They're not in dispute with each other. They're in strong agreement experimentally with each other.
Okay, so they're not in a strong agreement. There's none of that, okay? Look at their own experiments. Again, is it single photons? It breaks the wave, causes two Huygens effects, causes a wave function, which does calculus and figure out where the photon goes. Then in another experiment, no, it's two real photons, no wave functions, real photons somehow interact with each other and end up going to the wrong place. How are those two things at all consistent? How is that at all anywhere near something called consistent? And again, what do they keep doing? They keep pretending that water is the same as sound, is the same as light, is the same as magnetism. They're all the same thing. When any idiot can know they're not.
Now, whether, and I think it could be something to do with missing a trick with particles. It could be something to do with missing a trick with the nature of continuity and discreteness of space-time.
So again, just bring up this crap, the space-time thingy, as if there's any evidence whatsoever, any good, hard, substantial evidence indicating any such thing as a time dimension or any such fabric as a spacey stuff. You can't draw it because it's stupid. It's a vacuum cleaner inside of every single piece of matter, a vacuum cleaner, sucking space and dragging the matter with it. And we're all supposed to say that's a perfectly satisfactory answer. I'm saying that isn't any better than the homunculus explanation for human function. Let's just put a little man in my brain and say he's making me do it. I mean, it's just as empty and silly an explanation of function.
But the fact that mathematical and experimental cooperation exists.
So again, it doesn't exist. As I've pointed out with the two-slit experiment, their math doesn't even have consistent variables. When they do one experiment, the variable is how wide is the opening. The next experiment, the same variable is now how thick is the impediment. I mean, you know, you keep saying they have all this consistency and they have all this reliability and they have all this evidence. They don't have any of these things. They predict nothing real. Their evidence, they can't even describe it accurate. They can't describe the history accurately. They can't state the weight of the evidence anywhere near accurately. It's all hype, bullshit, shenanigans.
Both in classical physics and quantum mechanics, and not only that, but each theory holds hands with other theories.
None of them are compatible. So again, just to make it okay, relativity, quantum mechanics, impossible to combine them. They'll say it right to your face. It's one of them's got to go, or both of them have to go. There's no compatibility. As I've just pointed out, when they do the experiment with one thing, they change the variables. Do it with another thing, dark matter. Do it with another thing, yeah, the invisible man. Do it with another thing, oh yeah, homunculuses. And then they say words like virtual photon. Well, of course, that can't be in conflict with anything because it's so vacuous, it says absolutely nothing. The virtual photon's done it. And of course, it's compatible with everything because it has absolutely no description. It has no color, so yes, it's compatible with all the colors. It can be red, it can be green, it can be anything it needs to be because it's a virtual photon. It doesn't have to obey any kind of rational rules. I mean, you're just preaching their hype as if this is some barrier that's legitimate. This is a legitimate barrier I have to overcome is their hype. No. I should only have to overcome their real evidence.
And it all gels together to give a very broad range of models, mathematical model explanations of,
again, mathematical models that have absolutely nobody can even solve. So they have equations nobody can solve, and you could just make it up somewhere. You can just make it up anywhere in the equation. You just say, well, we know v equals dx over phi multiplied by beta 5 because we did that in that way over there in that other equation. And so even though there's no direct equality and there's only a circumstantial equality in the right circumstances, they'll just pretend now we can just use these two things interchangeably. Even though they can't be necessarily interchangeable because one was used in one context and now they've put it into another context. And the rules aren't the same. And that's how these formulas are engineered. So let's not pretend that's not what they constantly do when they're deriving these equations, is they're just making assumptions. Well, we made an assumption over there, we'll just throw that assumption in here.
Of phenomena or allowance of the calculations to make predictions.
Again, they're not predicting anything that isn't an observed fact. They're predicting effects that you can plainly see.
Yeah, so there's that. I think lastly, there was a finish up thing here that I could say.
Or maybe not. But we'll see. We'll wait for it.
Look at my notes. So please don't get angry with me as though I'm saying it from a first person point of view. I don't believe anything. Yeah. What I believe is that both.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. You don't. I'm not saying you can't sit there and play this devil advocate things and challenge me. I'm saying go ahead and challenge me, but don't challenge me on their fraud and their lies. I mean, don't tell me you have to account for this perfect experiment that isn't perfect. I mean, don't pretend that, oh, you have a huge burden to come up with this, to prove that jamming is a perfectly good explanation for why there's an effect. Because it's certainly not disproven by anything. We don't have any evidence saying that jamming couldn't be the explanation. So, you keep throwing barriers at me that, in my opinion, I could end up wasting a lot of time trying to prove the non-existence of the dark matter, right? I could spend a lot of time trying to disprove the existence of their invisible man. But would that be the best use of my time? To try to disprove something that never should have been interjected in the first place? I mean, I'd like to get your opinion since the keyboard didn't work. Let's see. It stopped working. I'd like to get your opinion on something.
And Susky.
Okay, I have this redshift theory. All right, so we have this idea that the universe... I don't care about the Big Bang. I don't care whether the universe is oscillating. I sort of think, okay, well, I'll let you get your opinion on this. I sort of think that the idea is that the universe is really functionally oscillating in the sense that gravity is changing over time. So as the matter condenses, there's less free energy, right? So as more and more energy is trapped inside the matter, there's less and less energy in the field, right? And it gets to a certain point where once there's too much matter too much energy in the form of matter, there's not enough external pressure to keep it compressed, and so it all expands again. And then when it's expanding, it's releasing a bunch of photons, like the galaxies are doing. They're just spewing all kinds of energy, and so that energy goes back into the field, and then the field energy starts to get stronger and stronger, the gravitational push, and so then it all contracts again. But to the redshift one. So the second point, redshift. So my explanation would be, so they say, and this only happens with stuff that are billions of light years away. And there's this curve, whatever they call it, the Hubble curve or whatever. This obvious relationship that tends to say the further away you go, the faster you're leaving. And the simple argument would be, not that light gets tired, but that as photons are traveling through space, they actually do hit hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms and other transparent atoms, right? I mean, transparency is a function of the atom itself. And those atoms would always tend to be going towards them. The atoms would have momentum. If they had any momentum, the momentum would tend to be more towards them than behind them, right? They're always going to, the photon will always be way ahead of anything coming from behind. So it's always going to hit more stuff coming at it. And so what happens is the photon hits the transparent atom, is transmitted through it, and is redshifted by the momentum of the atom. A little tiny bit of redshift. So maybe you have to hit 1 billion of these little transparent atoms to create some redshift. But the point would be is that we could assume that certain things with gas clouds around them, there would be more of these atoms and it would cause more redshift. So the more gaseous it would be, there'd be a little more redshift. Different circumstances could change it. But obviously that would be an explanation for how the light would end up looking like the thing itself was moving, when no, the light is getting reinterpreted by another moving object, these little atoms it's hitting. Plausible, right?
And myself will tell you that there are no pictures, which is to say we have no understanding of physical mechanisms for this stuff.
Right. I know they have no understanding. I'm saying I think I'm getting a pretty good reveal, but okay.
Right. That's not final. Yeah. I told the wattage, new microwaves, wattage, power. Right, so, that was a question. If you could find a basic AM radio signal transmitter circuit and explain how that works by...
All right, well, this part is sort of simple. So he's basically saying, you know, because they said cutting the signal in the video, and he's not really saying they're chopping it. It is sort of a chop process, though. So, I mean, this is stuff I actually did do, and I did it with LEDs to transmit signals. And you really do, just like a Morse code key, you basically just have your carrier frequency. And you basically just run it through a transistor that's working, you know, it's usually 2 transistors. You have a small one, and that goes to a power transistor to get more, you know, to increase your signal strength. But regardless. And the point is the transistor's working just like a key. So all you do is take your sound wave, your coded message, your digital information, and you just say to the digital information, you hit the transistor key, turn it on and off based on your amplitude, and you're basically going to turn on and off the light, and that'll send the signal. Now, obviously, if I have lots of nuances in my signal, I want to have some nuances in the on and off, so it won't be all the way off and then all the way on. It'll be as the key is pressed, it's a half signal, it's a quarter signal, it's a 0 signal, it's an 1/8 signal, it's a 1/10. So I can recreate a curved wave. I can recreate any wave function, and it just depends on how much detail I need to create sound. Now we know that sound doesn't care that much. You can use square waves, you can use triangle waves, you can create a tone with almost any shaped wave, and it'll be pretty much the same tone. You know, there won't be that big a difference. So it sort of is just, you can get away with just chopping it to create the tone, because you don't need any waveform. A square wave will sound a lot like a round wave. Not big enough difference to matter. But you're basically, that's all you're doing. So I mean, I did do that. I mean, you just create your carrier frequency, and then you just use a transistor, which is just a key, to turn it on and off based on your signal. No problem.
As you think it works, because I don't think that's not how classical physics and the design of the circuit works. Not by trying to, it's not designed with the purpose of chopping and being like a Morse code to put...
Well, AM is, so obviously amplitude modulation, that's all it's doing. It's just saying, is the key up, is the key down, is the key up, is the key down. So it's just modulating how much carrier you allow through. A lot of carrier, a little carrier, a lot of carrier, a little carrier. So you're just changing the amplitude of the carrier signal. How much of that signal gets through. A little bit of the signal, a lot of the signal. A little bit, a lot. A lot of wattage, a little wattage. A lot of wattage, a little wattage. That's it really is. It's just sending wattage. And so obviously the receiver might not even receive some of the low watt signals. If it's far enough away, if your receiver's far enough away, you're probably not even going to get some of the low end stuff. But that doesn't matter for most audio tones, so it just won't matter. The only part that really matters for the audio tone is the peak amplitude. All you need is the frequency. Like I said, the waveform just doesn't triangle wave, square wave, round wave. They'll all create a tone that's a tone.
Put audio signal atop of light. It is with this idea of wave modulation, yeah, and actually increasing them. That's the theory, that's the orthodox theory behind it. Now, so you can't.
Well, look, in classical electronics, they use the word valve, right? And a valve is just a way of turning it on and off at different, regulating how much flow comes through the pipe. So that's what a valve is, and that's the key to the transistor radio, is the valve. Before the transistor, it was the valve radio. And so the valve is the key ingredient. The valve is allowing it to be regulated. And that's all the transistor's doing. So I don't know, maybe this is just semantics. Like I said, when they say chop, they probably don't mean exactly that they're being harsh. They're just creating square waves. But the point is if all you're doing is creating a tone at 100 kilohertz, square waves will do it just fine.
So you have to look at that circuit. Maybe probably not. Yeah, the last point which went through my head looks like it's gone, and I'm keeping these nicely to half-hour videos, so I think we'll call it a day. We'll ramble on for maybe another 60 seconds, see if it can last. Spout of inspiration. The plan is to, in the short term, experiment number 1 is to boil some water by holding a single source of microwaves from a microwave at a test tube. That will be the first experiment.
Well, I'll say for the 15th time, it's only the 4th time maybe. I just don't know why you think it's really theoretically possible that you can, that there's any positive portion of the power, the wattage, that you can regulate and put all the wattage in one location and no wattage in another location, wattage in one location and no wattage in another location. That somehow photons work that way. Yeah. I mean, by that theory, you could almost say that your radio reception should keep blipping in and out, as your car's moving, because you keep going into the dead phase and then the on phase and then the dead phase, because the wavelength is really huge, meters long. So your radio blips out for 50 meters and then it blips back on for 50 meters and blips off for 50 meters.
Experimental video I make. Then from there, boil more than one, I suppose, and then Steve's offered to lend me his horn splitting antenna, and then I will. No, and the prediction is.
Well, he better use it first.
Yeah, that there will be these standing wave points of absence. That's the whole point. Is
I guess they're close to each other, or somewhat close to each other, or something.
Is DraftScience, please, I would implore you to, whilst you're talking, to recognise that is the prediction of orthodox science.
Well, see, I'm not quite sure it's their prediction, and I'm because again, they don't even predict anything that we don't already see. All they do is predict patterns. They don't predict causes, as stated. So they have no mechanism. And as stated, I think we already know that again, if you want to assert that you think when two photons interfere, they destroy the photon, I just think that you can sort of say that, well, no, that probably isn't right, because they would have noticed how dim this light was. That somehow the amount of light getting through is half as much. You know, and, you know, I just don't think that'll fly. The force is moved. You know, it isn't destroyed. And you can't destroy energy.
There are these null points of interference. And I understand you're saying they're wrong, and it's great that you've got a definitive test that distinguishes. And there'll be no, if that was true, I guarantee there'd be Nobel Prizes for you, because that would smash orthodox physics to pieces.
So you heard it right from his mouth, didn't you, people? So all you people ragging on me, he's saying just for this tiny little destruction of one tiny little aspect, you know, their use of radio as an example of interference. Because again, it is different with photons in the two slit experiment. It's a different experiment. The slits or the surfaces are causing the phenomenon there. I mean, it's quite obviously there's no surfaces in this radar experiment to account for how the photons are in the wrong place. Because they're not in the wrong place is the answer, and it's jamming. So it's a complete, you know, it's, look, yes, you get the same pattern, but again, I'll keep reiterating, it's the simplest pattern in the universe on and off. And it's kind of silly that everything they see, that where the simplest pattern you can make is created, they say it's the same of, you know, the rings, they say this, no matter what it is, simple pattern, on, off, on, off, on, off, they say it has to be interference. When it's the simplest pattern in the universe, there could be lots of mechanisms. So I'm just saying, the very idea of comparing radar, where you don't have a slit, you don't have surfaces, you don't have confinement, you don't have any of the things that are supposed to be, you know, the Huygens, I mean, the Heisenberg principle has nothing to do with the radar experiment, right? There's no Heisenberg problem here, you know. So you know, we haven't confined something, and then now we're forcing Heisenberg to take over. So I'm just saying, there's no continuity between these experiments, really. You really can't compare water to light to radar to electrons to buckyballs. They're not doing exactly the same thing. They're interacting based on different interactions with the force elements. I mean, the surface thing is the same in the sense that all of them are interacting with the surfaces. Okay, so that you can say, yes, electrons are the same as buckyballs as photons, but obviously a photon interacting with an electron is a lot different than an electron interacting with an electron, and an electron interacting with a buckyball is a lot different than a photon interacting with an electron. So I'm just saying that, you know, the idea that they just keep saying this is all the same mechanism is just so far from what we can rationally understand can't be the truth. It can't be the same mechanism.
You can show that there are actually those null spots are null at all. But as I say, I fancy that there will be null spots, because I've already said that that's the reason why.
Right, okay, so even though you're just devil advocating, you do have a fancy. So you're saying, yes, you do think somehow this idea of the nulliton makes sense to you, that there are the unaton or the antiaton, right? Because it's an antiaton. It just makes photon plus photon equals photon plus antiaton equals noaton. And to you that's logical, and to me that just now the thing moves the speed of light. There's no standing waves. The thing's going to plow right into it. You can't stop the energy. The energy. You can't move energy with energy. You can't bend force with force. It has to hit a piece of matter to be interpreted as something. It's nothing till it's interpreted by a piece of matter.
In a microwave, without a turn get, well, you know, it's like, well, those could be particle missing points. Yeah. Okay, end of stream.
Oakley doke. I guess this might be a new video in the kitchen. I don't know. It might be an old one. Who knows? No fundamental waves in reality. No negative. Okay, I like that. I'll probably like that. I probably won't close this window just in case it's not a new video, but I think that must be new. Let's see. I don't have subscriptions there. I have them over here in the alternative computer. Let's see if it's new. Nope. Okay, so it's an old video. Oh, interesting. All right, so till the next time, and the such. It's wearing the same shirt, though. I guess my subscriptions haven't picked it up yet. Yeah, that must be it. Okay, so maybe another video coming. Well, anyway, this is much more productive than the usual interaction, so I don't mind dragging it out for an eternity. So, yeah, that should be it. Okay, so till the next time and such.